So I'll talk about some of the ailments that spay casters have, and the cures for them. How we can identify what we're doing and fix that, hopefully on the water. So, how many of you, just so I get an idea, are relatively new to spay rods and spay casting? Okay, so we got about half of you. I imagine the rest of you are, pretty advanced casters. So I'll try not to bore you too much, particularly Mr. Putnam in the back. So out of the gate, one of the big ailments I see people have when they're casting is they have a tendency of applying a lot of power and force and movement with their top hand. Okay, so the top hand, or pushing and pulling the spay rod, is a really common ailment. And while it's not bad to push and pull with the top hand, but if you utilize your bottom hand, you're going to get a lot more power out of the bottom part of the rod. And it's a little bit counterintuitive as a new caster when you come from the single hand world, right? Because what do? We pull and we push. We pull and we push. And that's how we cast, right? So when we go and make that transition into the spay world, now our dominant hand is on the top. Okay, so we kind of screwed with our mind a little bit. So the one thing, if you find yourself getting a really good case of spay shoulder, so we're on river left, we're doing our snap tees, we're casting, we're stripping, we're fishing, we're doing everything right, but we really find our top shoulder is starting to hurt. It's typically because we're using our right hand too much. So one of the things we can do is take a look at how we're holding the rod. If we're really gripping the rod and we're really not using the bottom hand, we go, okay, what's the power ratio going to be in my mind? And I like to do like an 80-20. So 80% of what we're doing is going to happen off our bottom hand. So let's talk about the bottom hand and how do we use it? Well, we're on river left here, so a snap tee is a really popular cast. My first movement is I'm going to push that bottom hand out. I'm going to push again, and I'm going to pull. So when you're driving the rod, it's a push, it's a pull. And what you can do is if you find yourself really getting that spay shoulder, your right shoulder's getting sore, you can hold the rod like this, just with your pointer finger and your thumb. Just hold it just like that. You can grip your line there, but this will really force you to use your bottom hand and make your casts, okay? And the one thing about spay casting is if you find yourself working really hard, you're probably doing something wrong, or the rod line matchup is probably not correct. So to make a spay cast using your bottom hand with minimal power doesn't take a lot of power, okay? So we can generate a lot of line speed by using our bottom hand correctly, by pushing and pulling, and if the rod is matched up really well. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's talk about tempo. Tempo is another one that beginning or intermediate, even advanced casters have a hard time kind of grasping. I see so often casters go out in the water and they go, rah, rah, ah. It's like, whoa, man. You gotta take it down a notch, bro. Like chill, breathe. Let's talk about your tempo. Particularly in a piece of water like this that we find ourselves so often fishing, where you have a pretty good current, the inside bend is going to be slower water. If you find yourself in that position, you can actually go, okay, I can think about what I'm doing, I can set up my casts in a really good way. So like on a snap tee, since we're here river left, what's the first thing we need to do? We need to set an anchor point, right? So we come up, we set our anchor point. You can see I've got time. I still have time. I can come around and make my cast. So first off, if you're not in a really heavy, fast water situation, take your time, set your anchor point, and set it up in the right place. What's the right place? The right place is about a rod's length upstream of you, okay? So again, let's do a snap T on the tempo. From here, I got to create a D-loop. So I can take my time, create the D-loop, bottom hand pull, okay? So the tempo is critical, particularly when you're starting to think about all the components of it. Like I said, when you find yourself going really, really fast, you're going to have an issue. You're not doing it right. These rods and lines, no matter who you talk to up there, those guys are going to put a really well-balanced setup in your hand, and it should be easy to cast. Another thing on tempo is the acceleration when you set your anchor point, you make your D-loop. What's that acceleration right there? Is it real slow? Do it again. Do I speed up through the stroke right here? Right, little speed there. What's the right way to do it? Well, what I would tell you is, as long as you're making a good D-loop, setting your anchor point in the right place, it's going to go out there. But a lot of times we go, you know, I got my buddy upriver, I got Travis up here, I kind of want to show off a little bit, or I'm in a windy situation, I got to cut through the wind. So what's the key to making a little bit more of a powerful cast? And a lot of times is if you increase the speed or increase your tempo, not too much in your D stroke, you'll turn that D loop into a V loop, okay? So what makes the cast powerful? Well, the more rod load we put on the rod, the more power we're going to generate, right? So if I can load this rod more, I'm going to get more power to come out of it. So you can increase your speed through your D loop right through here, well, and get a little bit more line speed. Let's actually do a good cast there. So you increase your speed through your D loop to make the cast. Do you see the difference? Just loop tightens up, increase of speed creates more power, you know, a little bit more load on the rod. There's a couple other ways you can do that. Kind of deviate here from tempo, but you can do a dump cast right here off your, right there. Little speed right there, off it goes. So you can add a little bit of a dump cast right there. But we'll talk about ailments and where that comes in too. So a lot of times when we're casting river left, we're doing our snap T, we put our anchor way too high, right? Now I try to do that cast, kind of works, but not really. So to recognize where your anchor point is critical to a good cast. So if I recognize that my anchor point is way too high, I can walk it down. It's way too high, right? So what do? I walk it down. I'm going to dump it. I'm going to do a second dump. Dump softly always, words to live by, and then make the cast, okay? So again, if you recognize where your anchor point is, you can go ahead and make a slight modification. So on the other end of things, what if my anchor is too low, right? What if I really botch it and my snap is below me? Do I give up? No, just come around, do an off-shoulder cast, and make the cast happen. So one of the casting ailments is not recognizing where your cast is at in the process and giving up. Because so often you can just make a slight audible right there at the line of scrimmage and change it a little bit. Does that make sense? So far in casting ailments, we've talked about top hand. Remember, 80-20, use your bottom hand. Tempo, don't be this person, don't do that. Okay, slow and steady. Increase the speed if you want in the D loop to create a little bit more power. And the third one would be definitely recognize where your anchor point is. If the anchor point is in the right spot, you can make a quick little adjustment. Because, if Travis is judging me right up there and he's like going, oh man, what is he doing? Well, I accidentally made my snap tee in the wrong spot. If I just did a little dump cast, made the cast, Travis will go, oh, maybe he did like that wombat cast or something, right? So let's talk about another ailment that I see a lot too often. It's called cutting the corner, okay? So one of the hardest things in spey casting for a lot of people to wrap their brain around is this three-dimensional world that we live in, right? Because we come from the single-handed world, and what do? We make a beautiful cast like this. Your casting instructor, when you start to go sidearm, he hits you on the hand and says, you can't cast sidearm, right? So we live in this very two-dimensional straight-up plane, right? Does that make sense? So when we go to the spey world, we really want a little sweep. We want a little bit of three-dimension. So like on a snap tee, this swivel to our key position is critical, okay? And that sweep, for a lot of people, at times, is frustrating. It's hard to get. It's just a tough thing to wrap your brain around. And what I see a lot is cutting of the corner. And cutting of the corner looks like this. So I set my, and I come right here, and I kind of go like that. Yeah, it kind of works, right? But you can see the difference. I did not have that sweep, right? The sweep is critical because it allows the totality of the fly line to be incorporated into the D-loop, putting load on the rod. So again, doing it correctly, doing it incorrectly. That was a little exaggerated. But you see the kit, my point is you lose your sweep. So how do you keep your sweep? How do you learn the sweep? How do you get it? What's your name, ma'am? Lusanne? If I was to take a pie and throw it at Lusanne's face, okay? You seem like a nice lady. I would never do this. But if I was going to do this, you might catch it. If I was to take that pie and throw it in her face, and I was to do this, when I go right here, what happens? Pie falls off my hand, right? I can't throw it at her. But if I take that pie and I go, whoa, I can throw the pie, okay? So that particular movement, or the throwing of the pie in nice people's face, works for your top hand too. I got the pie coming around, make the cast, okay? Make sense? Here's another analogy you can use if you find yourself cutting the corner, not incorporating the full line into the D-loop. Imagine I'm a martini glass. Who likes martinis? I like martinis. Love them. So imagine I'm a giant martini glass. I am the stem of the glass, okay? And above me is the rim of this giant martini glass, which would be really cool. Uh-oh, that's what we get for fooling around. So what I'm going to want to do is take my rod tip and trace the rim of the martini glass. Maybe a big margarita glass with salt, and we're going to knock the salt off, right? Okay, so that came to me. So I raise my rod tip, and I trace it around the martini glass, and I make the cast, okay? So if you kind of think about those two particular principles, in terms of throwing the pie at nice people, knocking the salt off the margarita glass or around the martini glass, that will really help you keep your swivel not cut the corner, and make a nice cast, okay? Another ailment I see, and this comes from just basic casting principles. When I take my single-hander and I'm casting like this, what am I doing wrong? Dropping my back cast, right? Dropping my forward cast. There's that old cliche, we cast 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, right? So, but there's truth to that. You know, you definitely don't want to be dropping your forward cast, and you certainly don't want to be dropping your back cast. So often I'm talking to folks and they're like, Eric, my cast on the forward, I cast it and it's just, I'm not getting that loop. Hi, J. Michelle. My friend just showed up, she snuck in. What happened there? Why did I not get any trajectory with the fly line? Why didn't I get that really cool D-loop? Well, simple, because I dropped my rod tip. So if you keep your rod tip going forward in the right place, you give the fly line the ability to have some trajectory, and you build a nice loop. On the back cast, this happens so often. So often you see the dropping of the back cast in conjunction with cutting of the corner. These two love to live together. They love just to hang out. They like to really mess with your cast all at once. So same thing, you come around, there's that. I learned this from Simon. I'm going to steal a little of his thunder. If you hear a Frenchman slurping soup behind you, if you hear that, it's typically because you're dropping your back cast. So let me see if I can get the Frenchman back there so you can hear slurping his soup. You hear that? What's your indicator? What's the alarm that goes off? We're dropping our back cast. And if you hear that, just throw the other red alarm up and say, I probably cut the corner too. Because those two, like I said, have a tendency of living together to mess with your Spey world. That's kind of what I have. Let's open it up real quick. Does anybody have any questions? Does something not make sense that I said? Do you find, actually I have one more. I have one more little ailment that I see just kind of came to me. So often I see folks not setting their D-loop in parallel to their forward stroke. Okay, this must happen. You must place your anchor point, your D-loop, and your forward stroke need to all be going in the same direction. If you cross those, you will catch your line, okay? So what I mean by that is you have to pick your target. You have to go, okay, I'm casting right there. So have a direction that you're casting in mind. Okay, so I'm going to set my anchor point there. I'm casting at 70 degrees. I'm going to do the classic steelhead swing. That's what I'm doing. So think about where you're casting. Just don't go, okay, I have to set my anchor. I have to do a D-loop. I don't know where anything is really pointed. I'm just kind of going over here, and it kind of happens, right? So the other thing is really make sure that your D-loop is in the same path as your forward stroke. Again, I'm going to go 70 degrees across river. Okay? It has to be in the same direction. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you find your line tangling on itself, hitting your rod, all that ugly, it's typically because your D-loop was lined up in a different direction than your forward stroke. So, any questions?